Today we're going to be talking about the roots of the Enlightenment. Basically, all the ideologies and philosophies that, to some extent, led up to the Enlightenment borrowed from and built upon. First, we're going to start with a discussion about the scientific revolution. Okay, so please notice this diagram. This graphic organizer is designed on an image of a tree. So we're starting with the roots, all the ideologies that eventually led up to eventually making the Enlightenment. So with the scientific revolution, remember that was the time when it can really be described to come down to the philosophy of rationalism. Observation and reason were used to figure out how the physical world works, right? Using logic to figure out why do things work the way they work. The ideas from the scientific revolution were then borrowed by Enlightenment thinkers to basically develop further questions about the way the world works. Things like, what natural laws govern the way people should live? In other words, what natural laws exist? What laws exist in the world that basically say you should live to be happy, you should live to have food, you should live to survive, you should live to have a home? What are the laws that exist out there in our natural world that it's really our job to make sure that our government is supporting and fulfilling? Another question, does natural law give all people certain rights? Okay, so does every single person on the planet have the right to happiness? Does every person on the planet have the right to food and shelter? And then another question, what is the best form of government? Is it a monarchy with a king and a queen? Is it a democracy where everyone has a say in what choices are made by their government leaders? Is it a republic? What model works best? After the scientific revolution, remember, there's a little bit of overlap in our timelines, right? We talked about how the Renaissance kind of overlaps a little bit with the Reformation and eventually leads to the scientific revolution. Well, going back to further back from the scientific revolution to the Renaissance and the Reformation, which were really happening around the same time, pretty close. We have in the Renaissance this philosophy of humanism, right? This focus on the individual, the power of the individual. And it's then that humanists question their previous beliefs, such as Christianity, listening to the Catholic Church. Because remember, medieval Europe, during this time, medieval Europe was pretty much mostly Christians. And they celebrated instead the dignity and worth of the individual. So we got humanism as a main philosophy out of the Renaissance. Forward a little bit to the Reformation period, where Protestants, which are of course protesting the Catholic Church, are deciding that you need to put individual conscience, that is, you need to put your individual thoughts and thinking ahead of whatever the Catholic Church has said or whatever the authority, whatever power the Catholic Church says of what they do and what you should be doing. They think, hey, you know what? Instead, we need to think for ourselves. We need to make decisions for ourselves. Enlightenment thinkers basically take all those ideas and push them even further and say, you know what? We just want individuals to think for themselves, period. We don't need to worry about the Catholic Church or anybody else, but individuals need to just make choices for themselves. Now we're going to go even further back to basically some of the information you learned in 6th grade. The ancient Greeks, there's a big focus on reason. We have philosophers like Aristotle, Plato. And then for government ideas, we have in ancient Athens a democracy, right? So that people have some kind of say in what their government leaders are going to do and the choices they're going to make to run their civilization. We have the Republic of Rome, some kind of representative system where you elect people to represent you, and then those representatives then make choices about how things are going to be ran. And Enlightenment thinkers are now basically saying, you know what, we need to focus on rational thinking, logic, instead of focusing on what the Bible says and having faith in that in itself. But there's still a bit of mixture of religion during the Enlightenment, because some Enlightenment thinkers are saying laws of nature, the way that the world works, is because God has created it so that people can survive, so that people can have food, so people can live. And Enlightenment thinkers, some of them are still approaching moral problems with their Christian values. So what I mean by this, a moral problem is basically, should you steal that candy bar that's on the ground? Okay, let's just say that's a moral problem. Should you steal it from someone? And if you're using your Christian values during this time, because we can, as we said, in medieval Europe, a lot of Christians, even through the Enlightenment, there's still a mixture of Christians. Even though we had the Protestant faith break it up into different religions, a lot of people are still Christians. They're going back to things like the Bible, the Ten Commandments, that say you should not steal. And so people are still trying to figure out these moral dilemmas of, should I steal this from this person, and say, well, the commandment tells me not to. And so Enlightenment thinkers are kind of using a little mixture of, yeah, individual rationalism, but also still basing it on their Christian values or Christian ideas. So now we've arrived to the Enlightenment. We have a mixture of new ideas versus old beliefs. So overall, Enlightenment thinkers are definitely saying they prefer reason, logic, over just authority. Whether that's government authority, like who's in power, who's telling you what to do in the government, a king, a queen, whoever it is, the leader, or if it's religious authority, the leader of the Catholic Church, the leader of the Anglican Church, whatever it might be. Enlightenment thinkers are really questioning the basis of religion. Where is the religion coming from? Who said we had to do this? The basis of morality. How do we decide what's right and wrong? And the basis of, why do we have this kind of government? Why do we have a king or queen? So there's a lot of questions about the way things are being done in the world during this time. Some Enlightenment thinkers even begin to question, does God really exist? And all Enlightenment thinkers pretty much are saying at this point, all people are entitled to a certain amount of individual rights that every single type of government should respect. Whether that's everyone has a right to food or shelter, things like that. And it's a job of the government to protect those kinds of ideologies, those kinds of things. So that's where we are with Enlightenment. We can see how there's bits and pieces that led up to this point, but also how the Enlightenment thinkers are really borrowing back from previous times in history, previous philosophies and ideologies to come to where we are now. This focus on individual reason, individual logic, still sometimes mixed with religion and other philosophies from previous times as well.